Welcome everyone. I'm Ravi Gupta. I am CEO and founder of Elets Technomedia Private Limited and editor-in-chief of a magazine called Digital Learning. And here we are in the School Leadership Summit, which is focusing on South India. And we have school leaders, especially the private sector schools, teachers and principals in the whole day session. We have more than 50 top schools, the principals and teachers and speakers today, and more than 500 people have registered. And I am welcoming all of you who have joined us on Zoom and also who are watching us live on Facebook and YouTube channels of Elets. Today, we are having the honor of having with us Shri Anil Swarup ji. He is an IAS officer and he was the Secretary School Education in the Ministry of Human Resource Development, Government of India. And he is the man who is known for a wide sector of reforms in whichever sector, whichever department he has landed in. So he was earlier in the health department, the labor department, where he launched the Rashtriya Swasthya Bima Yojana scheme, which is lauded as one of the best health insurance schemes conceived and implemented anywhere in the world. And many other countries have tried to learn and replicate those ideas from the RSBY. He's also the man who brought e-auctions in the field of coal sector, and when he was the coal secretary, and also he had a great stint in the MHRD, where number of steps and reforms happened in the school education sector under his guidance. And the initial phase of the national education policy was also conceived under his leadership. So it's an honor to have you with us, sir. And I think we will discuss the main issue, which is like bothering all the school education community all over the country, and that is the National Education Policy 2020. So, sir, I will request you to talk about what are the great ideas you found in this policy, and how are they going to impact the school education sector, and are there any weaknesses in the policy which still have to get addressed? You can also elaborate on that. So over to you, sir. So please unmute yourself, sir.
Thanks a lot, Ravi, for those very kind words. I'm glad that you are discussing the national education policy, which is the talk of the town or of the country, I should say. When I took over as school education secretary, as you rightly said, before that I was in the coal sector. And some of it gets highlighted in my recently released book, Ethical Dilemmas of a Civil Servant, where I explained that when I was posted as coal secretary, I did not know much about that sector. And I asked a friend of mine, "Yaar, ye sector kaisa hai? How's this sector?" He said, "Have you seen Gangs of Wasseypur?" So that was my introduction to the coal sector. But when I came to education sector, I have written in my book, From the Dark Dungeons of Coal Mine to the Bright Lights of School Education. I soon discovered that the situation here was darker than the coal sector. It was much worse. And as I write in one of the chapters of my book, I say the school education is riddled with mafias. And the tragedy is that unlike the coal sector, where mining was underground and mafias were overground, in education they were all underground, masquerading as nobles and destroying the education sector. It is in that context I look at the new education policy, whether it addresses issues relating that beset the education sector. And in the context of school education, I think it's a masterful document. It is probably the most comprehensive way of looking at school education and is extremely visionary. So on an ideological plane, I would say it has come up with brilliant ideas, some of which I will outline. And there are only a couple of areas where I felt that the policy could have looked into. So I will make my presentation in two parts. One, to look at the conceptual framework of the policy, look at the highlights of those policy, look at the opportunities emerging out of those policies. And then in the second part, I look at the operational part of the policy. How does policy get rolled out in the field? What are the likely problems? So let me start with the conceptual part. As I said in the beginning, it's probably a very, very visionary policy. It has amazing ideas. To begin with, I think the focus on the early childhood education is a phenomenal one. All researchers have clearly revealed that the brain of the child gets fixed in the first few years of his existence. Now, this idea was actually implemented 3.5 years ago as a part of Samagra Shiksha. But the good news is that the policy endorses it and brings it into the policy as one of the major transformations that it seeks. So it's a brilliant idea to get the child educated early in his life. And education is not the usual education that the policy is talking about. Policy talks about a more comprehensive look at education. It looks at experiential learning. It looks as not rote learning. It says the focus should be on learning outcomes, on how the child evolves, rather than learning something out and then pouring it out in an exam. So early childhood education is one of the brightest features of the policy. The second important aspect in the policy is the focus on mother tongue during class 1 to class 5. Now, many people have said, why not English? Now, the policy is not against English. It says, and very rightly so, that the initial education should be in mother tongue because the chances of a child understanding concepts and other complex things is much better in his mother tongue. Now, this also has been clearly established through various researchers that it is easy to comprehend ideas and concepts in your mother tongue in the initial phase. The child can parallelly learn other languages. And let me tell you, people who are critical of this aspect, that probably the finest school in Delhi, that is Sardar Patel Vidyalaya, teaches in mother tongue from class 1 to 5 and produces outstanding children. So do the Jawaharlal Nehru Vidyalayas, where the classes are held in mother tongue to begin with. So this is a brilliant idea. The third important aspect of this policy is vocational training. I think so far we had looked at vocational training very differently. It was not put on the same pedestal as science, commerce, and arts. Now, vocational training is put on the same pedestal, and there will be an option for the child to go over to that. Now, this is good in the long term also, because you produce the children who've done their BA and MA, they don't have any employment opportunity. The opportunity comes from his learning and improving his skills. And the policy says that can start from class 6. So an excellent feature. Then another wonderful thing that the policy does is that there is a whole delusion that we get into when we give our class 12 exams. As Secretary of Education, I discovered that. And there's a full chapter in my book, Ethical Dilemmas of a Civil Servant, where I call it a farcical delusion. Now, what is this farcical delusion? Can you ever imagine getting 100 out of 100 in English literature? Shakespeare must be turning in his grave. But that's what happens in board examination. The children who get 100 out of 100 in English literature, it's not that they deserve that. Most of them get it on account of the spiking of marks that gets done in the board. And why does it happen? It happens because the admission to Delhi University and other good university is based on the marks that you get in class 12, and hence this maramari for this examination, and we get into this delusion. And it carried on because the child was happy with this delusion. The parents were happy, the teachers were happy, the schools were happy, everyone was happy. So this delusion continued. I am glad that the policy attempts to do away with this delusion by bringing in an entrance exam for the universities. So the focus on marks will another brilliant thing. The other brilliant thing that it does is, and which to my mind is eminently doable, is the focus on the teacher. I have always said the teacher lies at the pivot of school education. If we are unable to handle these teachers, we are in serious trouble. And another chapter in my book talks about these mafias in school education. And the biggest mafia in school education is the one run by B.Ed and D.Led colleges. Out of 16,000 B.Ed and D.Led colleges, 4,000 do not exist. They're just on paper and they can give you a degree. The policy attempts to address that. How does it do that? It says there will be an integrated 4-year B.Ed course. Thereby, all these furgy or fraudulent colleges will have to wind up their shops because they don't have this sort of a facility. So hopefully this fraud that is going on, these mafias will be shown the door. The second part relating to teachers is the selection of teachers to government schools. We are all aware that one former chief minister is behind the bars on account of this racket. The policy attempts to address that. It says that there will be a separate TET, teacher entrance test, and it will be much more sophisticated than the ones that is happening now. It will improve. The policy also focuses on training of teachers. Earlier, the training was done in a very unscientific manner. Just the targets were fixed and any or every teacher was trained. Now, through the Diksha portal, which was set up about 3.5 years ago, which is a vibrant portal, and policy recognizes that, they will be able to do that. So briefly speaking, I can go on and on the policy. At a conceptual level, the policy is a brilliant one. But what is the problem at the conceptual level? My only reservation with the policy is that it has not accounted for the role played by the private sector in school education. All of us are aware that more than 50% of children go to private schools, and the policy virtually ignores them. There's just passing reference to private domain and private sector education, and that too, they still treat profit as a dirty word. Now, I have my reservations because all the recommendations that have been given in the policy will require a lot of money. The policy says that 6% of GDP shall be allocated to education. Now, this was said by Dr. Kothari decades ago, but 6% never came. Maximum money that became available was 3.1%. Beyond it never went. I don't see that much amount happening. So where does the money come from? The government could have easily allowed for-profit school education, tax them, get some money and put it into school education. A huge opportunity lost. This is one. The second reservation that I have with the policy is the lack of recognition of the role played by non-governmental organizations. As school education secretary, I discovered what phenomenal work is being done by non-governmental organizations. In fact, that could have easily been leveraged. Much of the transformation that happened in states like Karnataka and Rajasthan in school education was on account of the role played by the non-governmental organizations. They could have easily been leveraged. It could have been done. And the third point that I have is the focus on examination. Whereas on the one hand, policy comes out beautifully and says the focus will be on assessment, but then talks about board exams at class 3, 5, 8, 10, and 12. I tell you, the child will be under enormous pressure. Why put him through that exam if you're having assessment separately? The word exam, the term that it is being held by board, is going to put enormous pressure on the children. This was not required. I don't know why it was done. But overall, I think the policy is wonderful. Now let me come to the operation part. That's where the problem will come. For any idea to fructify, there's no dearth of ideas in this country. You talk of COVID, everyone has an idea. These days, there's a discussion on NEET and JEE, everyone has an idea. So there's no dearth of ideas. But for an idea to fructify and sustain in a country like India, it has to be politically acceptable, socially desirable, technologically feasible, financially viable, administratively doable, and judicially tenable. A handful. Without these being fulfilled, I can assure you, with my 38 experience in civil service, it won't work on the ground. So how do you make it work on the ground? In the context of this policy, I think the policy is politically acceptable because cleared by the cabinet. It's eminently socially desirable, all these ideas are. Technologically, I don't see any problem, but we run into problem when we talk in terms of financial viability. Where is the money? I hope that money comes. It's a hope that the policy also have. But my hunch is, given the financial situation of states and the central government, find it very difficult to get money because even now teachers are unable, we are unable to pay all the teachers all the time. There's serious trouble on that front. And then administrative doability. Where is the human resource? Let me give a couple of examples. The policy very rightly talked about teaching in mother tongue. Now schools are already teaching or they are enamored with English, so you have English medium teachers. Will you throw them out? How do you get the mother tongue teachers? If there are multilingual teachers, children sitting in the class, which language would you see it? What will be the migrant workers? So there are many, many operational problems. As I said, I can go on and on. I've been having discussions with states, with some other people to assist them on how to take this forward. But all said and done, the policy shows us the way. And let us commit ourselves to implementing this policy, especially those aspects of the policy which do not require so much investment. And before I conclude, I'd like to say a couple of words on the apprehension or the misapprehension that people have. I'm concluding because I would like to have it an interactive. I don't know, you have the facility of people asking questions. In every webinar, I don't speak much. I respond to questions because people have many many questions in the mind about the policy. I would like to assure many private people, many schools, that the policy is not going to implement tomorrow. This is a roadmap laid down. Government is already interacting with various stakeholders to get their ideas. So don't be apprehensive about the policy. If there are issues, government is discussing with them, with every stakeholder, and gradually the policy itself is not enforceable. What is going to happen is, based on this policy, the government is going to come up with government orders. Take a close look at those orders and try and identify what can be done. So it's just 20 minutes beyond 10 o'clock. As I said, I can go on, but I would rather look at questions that you have. If you don't have questions, I'll carry on and talk more about the policy. Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to come to these Elets conference. After a long time, I'm meeting Ravi. I find him as bright and as sprightly as he always was. Thank you very much.
Sir, let me ask you the first question which someone has raised, Mr. Girish, is on the chat box actually. So I am requesting all the audience to ask the questions in the Q&A box and not on the chat box. And the first question is that how, when will it be implemented in your opinion? That's question number one. Second question is on the chat is by Vivek Yadav, and he's asking why government not taking any move on higher studies, which is really part of worry. Another question is, will the secretary...
Hold on.
Okay.
Because I've grown old. You are young, I've grown old, I forget. So
Sorry.
Let me answer the first question as to how will the policy be implemented.
Sure.
The first thing that the government has done, and we had a very intensive webinar day before yesterday, where the current Secretary of School Education spoke at length and explained how the policy will be rolled out. So what the central government has done is, it has broken the policy into various segments. And for each segment, they are working out a detailed action plan as to how it will be done, who will do it, by when it will be done. So it's a very detailed exercise that is taking place. The governments appear to be very committed. In one of the state governments has asked me to directly assist them. So the commitment is there in the state governments and the central government. They find the policy very useful. There could be some problems, but that would be true of any policy that comes out. But the commitment levels are high. So for example, if they have to do in terms of teachers, that is one of the major segments of the policy, they are looking at further strengthening the portal called Diksha, which is already there, on how to further strengthen and work out the details regarding training of teachers, so on and so forth. I can go to each segment and explain to you what sort of planning is being done, but let me assure you the planning is certainly being done. The second question was related to higher education, though I don't directly or never dealt with higher education directly, but let me tell you, there are two segments to the policy. I spoke only about the school education. The second segment is totally about higher education, and there are some wonderful provisions in that as well. The flexibility that government wants in terms of enabling the child to complete his course. So the course may be of 4 years, but if you have a bright person, you can do it earlier. So you clear those subjects, you can do that earlier. You want more time, you can take more time. You can switch from one subject to the other subject. So it's a wonderful idea of enabling student to choose. That flexibility exists in school education as well as in higher education. So it's not that higher education has been ignored. In fact, there are as many pages devoted to higher education as to the school education in the policy. What was the third question?
So the another question is that you were mentioning about board exams in grade 3, 5, 8. When do you think this will be implemented, and can we oppose it?
See, first of all, I am not very sure when it will be implemented. My hope is that it will not be implemented at all. Because having board exams as 3, 5, 8 will not only be impractical for the boards to conduct it, because they are, as it is, overburdened with class 10 and 12. So I hope this doesn't get implemented, because if it does, it will create enormous burden both on the board and the children. So this is the part of the policy I'm not very comfortable with. But as I said, there are no perfect policies, which everyone would agree. So this is one aspect I also disagree with it, but that's how life is. That's how democracy is. But I don't think you have to oppose it. I thought you were asking whether you could oppose it. You can obviously express your opinion that this is for giving the reason why you feel this is not an appropriate way of going about it, because that is how democracy works. opinions are taken from stakeholders, and final decision gets taken. So policy is a roadmap. Policy is not a decision. Decision gets conveyed through government orders. You must understand this difference.
So there's a question about preschools. Someone has asked that will preschools come under primary school? Can they start first and second grade? So I think that's...
See, earlier primary was defined from class 1 to 5. You look at the new policy, it includes first 5 years, wherein it says the initial 3 years plus 2 years. So that they call the early childhood, the foundational learning. So they have changed it a bit, doesn't matter. Don't worry about it. At least in urban areas, I know for sure, number of private schools had already started preschool. Because I remember my granddaughters went to school and they did as many classes before class 1. Now they're doing after class 1. So it's called nursery, KG, whatever. I'm not very conversant. But the preschool business had already started. Now the government feels that within their domain also, they will have this preschool education.
So another question is that will there be a competency framework given to the schools?
Absolutely. That's what, in fact, in the webinar day before yesterday, the director NCRT himself laid out that he's working on a competence framework. So competence framework, the national curriculum framework will be worked out. The competency framework will be worked out. All these details are being worked out by the government and will be before you soon.
So there's another question, which is that how will the morale of the teachers of Kendriya Vidyalaya will be looked at? I think
moral.
Yeah, the moral. Like
see, morality. See, the moral part is self-inflicted. If you think someone else will make you, look at some of the Kendriya Vidyalaya teachers, and I've had the pleasure of interacting with some of them. They exist in the same environment as others, but they feel highly motivated. Motivation comes from within. Motivation will never come from outside. And I'm very clear. Again, since I keep going back to my book, The Ethical Dilemmas of a Civil Servant, and Kendriya Vidyalaya teachers are also civil servant, I have clearly said, if you have to get motivated, you have to look at such people, such civil servants who are motivated in these set of circumstances. They're not giving anything additional. Motivation comes from within. So if the person who's asking me a question is a teacher, let me exhort her or him that unless you are self-motivated, you can rest assured you can't motivate anyone else. So whatever comes from outside is a bonus, but the motivation has to come from within. You have Mr. Ravi Gupta is sitting in front of you. Who motivated him to do what he's done today and reach the heights that he has? It was self-motivation. I've seen him grow. I know him since, if not earlier than that, I know him since I think 2008 or 2009. And I've seen him grow from there to this level. What motivated him? Did government give him any subsidy or anything? None. He did it himself. So you have innumerous number of examples around you. You have to look around and seek inspiration from them. If you are a teacher, it's a must for you.
So another question is that what subjects should be compulsorily taught and what subjects should be given as a basket of choice to students?
I am not an expert at this as to what should be taught and how it should be taught. I have never done that myself, never taught. But my suggestion is that in the policy, there is enormous amount of flexibility. And now I think the experts are sitting to see if there is a need for making anything compulsory. I would not believe there will be any compulsion. In the initial phases, till about class 8, yes, there will be some subjects that will be taught. Languages will be there. In the initial classes, even mathematics will be taught. These are things, numeracy and literacy, these are things that will be taught in the beginning. But later on, I think the policy is absolutely right. It gives a total choice to the child.
So another question is that if there are board exams for grade 12 and not for grade 10, should all schools be senior secondary only? How will that work?
Sorry, come again, I couldn't.
So people have assumed that the policy is saying that board exams will be only held for grade 12 and not for grade 10. So is it like a policy?
No, I don't think so. I think the policy says board examinations at class 3, 5, 8, 10 and 12.
Okay.
So I don't know where this is coming from.
Okay. So someone is then confused there, and sir, just a second. Like some have asked on the chat and some on the Q&A, so I have to like juggle it. And so there's a question that Jharkhand Education Minister doesn't want to implement NEP 2020. He says that NEP 2020 has quite outlandish characteristics. Please elaborate merits and demerits of NEP as per your perception.
I think my entire presentation was on merits and demerits. I explained that. It's, you know, it's a personal perception. Let me explain this to you. You know, whenever such a policy comes, we always look for perfection. I wish there was something perfect. We have to look at the positives of what we have, especially youngsters. I appeal to them. Yes, there could be problems in certain areas. I am myself slightly critical of certain aspects. But as a youngster, I would like to implement what is doable. I mean, in life also, you don't get everything that you want. You may have a difference of opinion. In fact, in democracy, you should have a difference of opinion. You have one, fair enough. But there are many aspects of the policies which can, should, and probably will be implemented.
So, another question that, as you mentioned, that money allocation is difficult, increasing it is difficult to 6%. So, someone is asking that how how does government plan to get the money? Will there be a new tax? Will we divert a significant chunk of CSR funds into education? So that's the question.
See, I'm not a part of the government, so I don't know what government will do. I can only conjecture. You know, I talked about the possible opportunity lost in terms of encouraging private sector for profit school education and taxing them. I think taxation is already pretty high. You have an education cess already going in. So I don't know whether the government will be in a position to increase the tax for education. More than that, important would be whether the government prioritize education as a sector to be focused on and divert funds. Because in any situation, there are competing demands on the money that becomes available. Even at your home, you have competing demands on the salary that you earn. And you decide, okay, I'll do this and not do this. My hope is that the government or whoever the government is in power will treat education as important and give it the priority it deserves. But CSR funds have their limitations. I don't think through CSR funds, government can supplement what it is doing. It is not even 1% of the entire budget of the government. So I don't think CSR funds can help. But had the government gone in for private education and enabled it, probably taxation would have helped.
Another interesting question, which I think will open up a Pandora's box, is that someone has asked that what is the difference between private and public school? Should all schools be controlled by government? And another question is related to it is that will this policy be applicable on international schools?
See, let me ask the second question. The policy will be applicable on international schools because whichever be the international school here, they are governed by the laws of the country. And if there is an order pertaining within a particular law of the country, international schools will have to follow that discipline. The first part with regard to what is the difference between public and private schools, of course, the ownership is the primary thing. Whereas the ownership of a government school is government owned, private schools are owned by the private schools. There are certain regulations that apply both to public and private schools. So the process of registration, the process of now the policy also talks in terms of accreditation, policy talks in terms of evaluation. All this will be done by a government agency. The policy clearly brings out that they're going to split the existing departments of education in state governments. One part will look into government schools and run them. The other will do the regulation part. So there are a number of regulations that become applicable both to public and private schools. And those regulations shall be applicable. For example, the government of UP has come up with a legislation on fee regulation. Now that will be applicable to the private schools, but the regulation will be implemented by the government agency to ensure that those provisions are followed. Similarly, there is a registration process. When a school is set up, you have to seek a registration. That is for both public and private schools. So the regulations will apply uniformly to all schools and will be administered by government agencies.
So another question is from Seema Gupta. She's asking, like, she's the principal of in school in Aurangabad. So she's asking that how the policy will be rolled out for CBSE private school, and any special training for my teacher is required.
I would assume that the teachers will be trained. CBSE does even now. CBSE has a protocol, and that protocol is followed even private schools that get affiliated to CBSE. So those protocols will be followed, and in the context of policy, I am certain that there would be certain training courses that will be worked out.
Another question is that will the NEP be applicable on the state board affiliated schools also?
Yes, yes, national education policies for the entire country. But let me clarify here, because these type of questions are coming. The policy does not mandate anything. For example, the policy talks about 3-language formula. It does not mean that every state will be mandated to have 3-language formula. You know, one state has already said that they will only have 2-language formula. You know, and similarly, when it talks about the mother tongue being the medium of instruction from class 1 to 5, it does not say it should happen from tomorrow. The policy says that's the best way forward. Now it is for the central and the state government to adopt it. And this adoption comes through government orders. I don't think even central government will mandate the state governments to do this, that. What the policy does is enables people who want to move in a direction to move in that direction. It also shows a direction to people who don't know which direction to go. But it is certainly not mandating that from tomorrow everyone will do this. That's not what the policy is. If there are apprehensions in the mind of anybody, I'd like to dispel them, because this is not the objective of the policy. Objective is policy is to show the direction, not push you in that direction, to enable you to move in that direction. There's a difference between them.
So one of the questions someone is asking that if you had to make this policy, what will you add and what will you delete in
wow,
this?
Wonderful. So when Dr. Kasturi Rangan came, I wanted to tell that earlier, but now that this question has come, let me explain this to you. In my book, Ethical Dilemmas of a Civil Servant, if some of you have an opportunity to read it, there are 4 chapters on education where I've identified the problems relating to education. Now, fortunately, most of the problems get addressed in the policy. I remember when Dr. Kasturi Rangan came to meet me, I was Secretary of School Education and he was in the process of formulating the policy. So he asked me, what is your suggestion for the policy? I said, you are wasting your time. So he was a bit surprised. He said, you all have set up this committee and you are telling me. I said, I am now Secretary of School Education because I have come to understand now that the country does not require another policy. Country requires an action plan. You have to work out what needs to be done, how it will be done, who will do it, by when it will be done. So whenever you come up with a policy, you must have an annexure of an action plan, because by making that action plan, you will understand what is doable and what is not doable. And hence you will not propose something which is not doable just because you don't have to implement it, you will advise it there. That's what I said. So when the policy came, I looked at the policy and I find that action plan is missing. If I were the formulator of the policy, I would have had a detailed action plan along with the policy. That is one. Number 2, I'm glad a number of issues that I raised in my book and I raised with him have been addressed in the policy, but I would have encouraged private sector, because I don't know why we have this animosity to private sector. I have always believed in public-private partnership. You know, normally what happens is that as government servant, we keep cursing the private sector, that they are making money left, right, and center. And everyone in the private sector, or quite a few of them, keep cursing the government that without paying the money, nothing happens. Both are equally wrong. There are good people in the public domain, there are good people in the private domain. My contention was these people should come together, set a public-private partnership, learn from each other and move ahead. Of course, post-retirement, for the past 2 years, I've been engaged in a movement called Nexus of Good. And the whole idea is to bring these good people together. I think policy misses out quite substantially by not engaging with the private sector. So if I were to formulate the policy, I would have done that. I would have also looked at the practical aspects of what has been recommended. But be that as it may, I think the policy itself is a fabulous document.
Sir, I would like you to elaborate on this private sector part, because a lot of our audience is in the from the private schools, and they like it would be good to know that how as a policy maker you have perceived the role of the private sector in the school education sector, and what role it is playing, and what are the areas of improvement it has. So I'm this is the question I'm asking, not from the audience.
First of all, upfront, we have to recognize the wonderful role being played by the private sector in contributing to quality education in this country. That is the first, because without recognizing that, you won't take the next step. Because if you keep doubting them, there is absolutely no doubt that some of those in the private, only some, and that's one of the mafias that beset school education, who actually make profit, but don't show it as a profit. And that's doing a lot of disservice to the country. And that's why my second point is, I would have allowed, and it should be allowed, to make profit. And I would tax it. Let it be done legitimately. The reason is very simple. You know, only those that can afford, and quite a few people can afford, will go to those schools. I'm not pushing anyone. I'm not saying don't improve public education. Please do that. But allow private sector also to flourish. In fact, facilitate it. Enable more schools, private schools, to be set up. That is one. The second is a suggestion that I've given in my book, of starting a voucher system, of giving the choice to the child to select a government school or a private school. Why are we pushing everyone? So, for example, if we are spending about 12,000 rupees per annum on every child in government school, how about giving him that voucher and allowing him to select a private school if he has to go? So the outgo from the government will be the same. He will have a choice to select, and then government, through its wisdom, can set up an accreditation system and accredit those schools which are enabled. I mean, I draw this idea from RSBY, where we enabled private sector to participate, empaneled private hospitals, and gave the choice to the patient to decide whether he wants to go to the public and private. This competition will improve the quality. So as I said, I can go on and on how private sector can be brought in, should be brought in, for improving quality of education in this country.
Sir, as you mentioned about RSBY, which is the health insurance program, there is a more recognition of a private sector in the health sector. Like, private hospitals are not taken as a taboo. But in the school education, why
no, because we are fundamental hypocrites. No, I will send my child to the private school, yet condemn it. I mean, I wanted to ask the entire team who gave this policy, where did your children study? And then you advocate something else in the policy. How can you do that? If something good is happening, let that good flourish. Why are we pandering to these socialist ideals, which I thought we had buried in 90s? Why couldn't it be brought? This was a huge opportunity to open up the school education sector to private investment. Why can't we treat them as investors? What is wrong in it? But unfortunately, the government does not allow that. The policy says not for profit. The whole thing is not for profit. Why not for profit? There is a difference between profiteering and profit. If someone is profiteering, you can have regulations and see that it doesn't happen. But don't stop them from making money. What is wrong in making money?
So, the another question is that you mentioned in the beginning of your address today, that role of NGOs. Like you mentioned that NGOs are playing an important role. If you can highlight, what are you talking
Wow,
about?
I'm again glad that you answered, because this is a very dear to me. Let me go a bit back. And again, this comes out in my book, where there's a full chapter on the role that the NGOs are playing. When I became school education secretary, I was probably most ignorant about education in India. And my ignorance went around, and so there were a number of advisors who came to advise me on how school education should happen. So, just a minute. So when these advisors came, and they kept telling me, sir, why don't you go over to England, Finland, Holland, Scotland, all the lands of the world? So I asked one of these advisors, I've seen motherland. So he didn't understand the question. I said, go around the country, you might find some solutions. So then I started visiting. I visited 24 states. And when I say states, I didn't merely go to the headquarters. The first two districts that I visited were Bastar and Sukma in Naxal areas. I drove from Pune to Goa, dropping down on the way to look at the schools. I drove from Srinagar to Leh, not taking the national highway, going deep inside mountains to understand education in India, and so on and so forth. In all these visits, I found some amazing work being done by NGOs and government schools in coordination with each other. And what we did was, I must give you one incident if you have time. Do you have 5-10 minutes?
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Okay. So I must mention one incident, which again is a chapter in my book. I walked into a school in a place called Pastepada, 120 kilometers north of Thane district, deep inside tribal area. And this was a government primary school which did not have electricity. I just walked in and I met the teacher. But as I walked into the class, I found that every child had a tablet. I was shocked. I asked this teacher, Sandeep Gund, where do you get the electricity from? So he took me beside the 2-room school and showed me a foldable solar panel. He said, sir, I charge batteries from this and from battery I charge the tablets. But I said, in this back of the beyond, how did you manage to get these 40 tablets? He said, sir, when I came to the school, there were about 40, 50 children here. Some of them came to the school, some didn't come to the school. I had a second-hand laptop. So I used to play educational videos. I used to download them where I used to get it, where I had internet. I had to come to the school and play them. So these children became very fascinated. They used to sit around. After 2 months, 20 parents came to the school and asked him a funny question. They asked him, earlier these children never used to go to school. Now they run to the school. What have you done? So he explained to them what he did. Then when he found these teachers fascinated, he asked them to contribute 500 rupees each. They asked him why. He told them that I want to buy 2 more tablets so that I can attach to the laptop and make them into different age groups they can watch. So they contributed. Poor people, but they contributed. Now this passion of the teacher, is spread around. So one NGO and CSR funding agency visited the school. They saw this passion of the teacher, and the CSR funding agencies became so fascinated that he contributed these tablets and a smart screen. Around which time I visited the school. And I was also very impressed with this teacher. So I took a photograph with him and tweeted it. Suddenly he became a local hero. So other schools started visiting him. It became a pilgrimage for them. In the meanwhile, I met the President of India in a different context, but I narrated this story to him as there was time. And I asked him, would you like to meet him? He was also very impressed. He said, why not? So I called the teacher over to Delhi, took a photograph with the president, tweeted. Suddenly Sandeep Gund becomes a national hero. But this is not the end of the story. The Pastepada model of this village has been replicated in more than 50,000 schools of Maharashtra. And not a single penny from the government, all from CSR fund. 354 crores. It's an amazing, amazing story of public-private partnership. Then I saw the phenomenal work being done by Akshara Foundation, by Kavalya Foundation, by Sampark Foundation, by all the foundations that I came across. I went to Muktangan, saw how well they're doing, went to people. I saw Lend a Hand doing phenomenal work in vocational training. I tell you, I was aghast at the public-private partnership. So what I did, I got this 120 models. Out of these, all of them, I called them over to Delhi over 6 days, understood how public-private partnership is working, and picked up 24 models and took them back to the states. And they are scaling. So Kavalya Foundation, which was originally only in Rajasthan, now is in 4 states. Sampark Foundation only in Chhattisgarh, now in another 4 states. Akshara Foundation has expanded in Karnataka, gone to Odisha. That's power of public-private partnership. That's the power of the NGO. I'm not saying all NGOs are great, but they are phenomenal work being done by NGOs. Let's appreciate that. Without appreciating that work, I don't think we'll move forward. And that is the essence of Nexus Group.
Amazing. This is an amazing story about you told about that, how that.
If you want more stories, I think you should read Ethical Dilemmas of a Civil Servant. Yes. You will be amazed at the good work that is happening around you, despite all the problems.
So let me take a few more questions. We still have 10 minutes with us. 11 a.m. is the time where we end. So someone has asked a question that in Maharashtra, teachers are paid 6,000 per month as a salary for Shichak Sevan. Hope this policy will change the salary amount, and this will motivate the teachers. So any items in this?
No, it would be difficult for me to comment on a particular state and the salary that is being paid. I'm certain that the government teachers are not paid 6,000. There would be much more. It could be in private schools that some schools don't pay that much. In government schools, the teachers are the best paid employees in a village. In a village, they are the richest people around. That's what. So I don't think money is a factor with teachers for their motivation. There could be many other factors, but I don't think most of the government teachers are paid very well. And I don't think that should be a reason for them not to be motivated.
So another someone has raised about the question that some of the states like Delhi have claimed that a lot of improvement in school education has happened. So many people say that it's very difficult or perhaps impossible to improve the government school. Like there are pessimists and there are optimists. So how do you see the situation?
So I'm really impressed with the nature of questions that are coming in. They're very, very, very relevant questions. Let me answer them in two parts. This one. First of all, I think Delhi did remarkable work in school education. And that is, all evaluations have revealed that the learning outcomes have improved. Phenomenal work. There's a lot to learn from what has happened in Delhi. I would like to put everything to rest on that. Wonderful work. Now, as far as government schools are concerned, we have this problem of clubbing everything together. Do you forget that Kendriya Vidyalayas are government schools? Do you forget Navodaya Vidyalayas are government schools? They are phenomenal schools. I mean, I know of so many of my colleagues coming out of Kendriya Vidyalayas and Navodaya Vidyalaya, doing extremely well in life. So it's wrong to club the entire thing together. Similarly, don't club all the government schools of all these of the entire country. There are states where government schools are doing phenomenally well now. In fact, there is a reverse migration from private schools to government schools. And when we talk of private schools, we only talk of good schools. We don't talk private schools which are not so good. So it is wrong. I mean, my suggestion to everyone attending this webinar is, please don't club and condemn. There are good things in every group. Let us look at those good things and try and learn from them rather than condemning them lock, stock and barrel. It doesn't work that way. There are different types of people, different qualities of people. Even in your own personality, there are positives and negatives. Which individual is perfect? Now, the question is what you are looking at. If you look at positives, you will try and learn from it. If you look at negatives, you will try and improve upon that. The approach is very important.
So another question again, a different question is that we are seeing a disparity in school fees from preschool to colleges. So asking I think the crux of the question is that do we need standardization of school fees across the country?
You know, it would be different to standardize everything, but certainly certain regulations. And I would suggest some of you should look at the legislation that has come in UP. It's a very remarkable legislation on determining what is the reasonable fee. But you can't standardize, you know, a fee that will be charged, say, in a village would be different, will be charged in Delhi. You can't have same fee structure for a village and in Delhi because the expenditures are different and everything is different. So it cannot be uniform, but certainly it could be rationalized as has already been done in the state of UP. I mean, we are in the process of to see how the UP legislation can come in other states because it's solving a number of problems. The principle is very simple. You can have any free structure when the child is getting admitted to the school because then he has a choice to join or not to join. The problem arises when he joins the school, then what should be the basis on which escalation of fees should happen? Because then he's a captive audience, so to say, he's part of the school. He can't get out of the school and join any other school. So the legislation is on a fundamental principle that there has to be a rational basis of increasing the fee. That's what the legislation is all about. And that's the way it has to be done.
Another question is, sir, that don't you think that there should be at least a minimum salary decided for each teacher in school across the country?
No, as far as government schools are concerned, they're fairly well determined. For private school teachers, I think this policy will bring in some features where there would be some minimum determined.
Sure. And just a second, I'm juggling between chat and the questions.
There is a question here, very interesting one. Would you like to say on what would you like to say on exemption of fee during lockdown?
Yes.
This many people would want to. My dear friend, please try and understand that the school incurs expenditure. If you don't pay fee, do you think the salaries of the teachers will be paid? There is a fixed expenditure that the school has to incur. Whether the child goes to school or doesn't go to school, the additional expenditure is not much. But the fixed expenditure is there. There is the capital cost, there is a salary to the teacher, salary to their employees, that has to be incurred. Where will that money come from? So there has to be an arrangement. I know of a number of schools, entering into an arrangement, either in some cases taking part fee, differing fee, the number of formulas that have been worked out. But to say exemption during lockdown, there is no tree available where you can shake and get the money to be paid. So we'll have to be realistic.
Sir, someone has asked about how do you be the role of counseling in schools, and do you think that NEP should, like you mentioned about focus about counseling?
The policy lays a lot of emphasis on counseling because the choice is available to the child. Counseling assumes an increased importance. How do you guide him to take a decision? So the policy does have those features, and I'm sure there will be many more counselors in the school to guide the children.
So another question is that NEP talks a lot of pedagogical change and mindset of learning and mentorship. How will teachers and school administration be brought up to speed on this form of implementation perspective? And
so
how,
first is the broad guideline which the NCERT is working on. Once that guideline comes, there is a roadmap for training of teachers, because without training the teachers, I don't think they will be able to follow. So there will be a massive training framework that will be created for the teachers to be brought on board to roll out what is being designed by the central and the state governments. So there would be training of the teachers.
So I am entering into the last phase of the question, and someone is asking about your book, like you are referring about how to buy the book.
The book is available on Amazon. You just go to Amazon, type my name, Anil Swarup, and you'll get it. Ethical Dilemmas of a Civil Servant. You have to just type my name on an Amazon, and it will take you to my book. You can buy it there. And I would look forward to your feedback on the book. And I would request Ravi to convey my email ID to all the participants. Sure. Swarup8@yahoo.com. I will see if I can type it out in the chat box. But I would suggest, please convey to everyone. I look forward to your feedback on the book. I'd love to hear from you.
Yes, email address is on the chat box. So like I request each of you to please give feedback to sir on his session also, and also on the book. Sir, another last question which I am very much interested and tempted to ask is that your idea about nexus of good. So
I'm glad.
What about it?
I tell you, the idea of nexus of good came because when I moved around the country, I saw a lot of negativity. And you look at the television, nation wants to know only negative things. The world has either fallen down or about to fall down. But I saw a lot of good work happening around, a lot of wonderful work. I mean, you were one of them when I was impressed with the manner in which you're going about this wonderful work happening in the country. Can we turn our eyes towards that good work? Can we try and appreciate that good work? We are so fond of masala that we don't want to discuss positive things. Can we do that? Because the thrill that you get out of appreciating someone is much better than the thrill that you get out of deprecating someone. So I would suggest to everyone, please try and look at good things around you. That's what nexus of good is. Take a look at it, understand the why of it, understand the how of it, and then try and associate yourself with that good. See if you can replicate that good. See if you can learn from that good. See if you can scale that good. All the rascals and ruffians have gone together, and they're making life difficult for us. Can good people come together? So we set up, to start with, we set up a Twitter handle @ Nexus of Good. Then we set up a portal, nexusofgood.org.in. I would suggest if you could convey to all your participants, nexusofgood.org.in. You can actually join the Nexus of Good. And this portal is extremely rich in terms of good things that are happening around the country. There is an education sector, there is a health sector. All sectors are there where you can actually very easily upload a positive story that you come across. And we regularly hold webinars and earlier seminars to disseminate the good work that is happening. In fact, the last webinar was held on 27th of this month, wherein the Secretary of School Education spoke about the education policy. More than that, many states and NGOs came and showed how they are already implementing this policy, so that others started believing that certain parts of the policy can be implemented forthwith. So the idea is to create this positivity about being able to do what needs to be done. And the confidence comes from the fact that since good is already being done, it can be done. If you don't believe it can be done, it will never be done. And the evidence of it is there. There's so much good work happening around you. May I invite all of you to join the Nexus of Good. Very simple to join. You can join as a friend. no financial commitment involved. You can also join as a donor. There are hundreds of people who joined the movement. You're most welcome to join it and be a part of this movement called Nexus of Good.
Sir, another question, although we are almost at the time, but I am interested to ask that. Someone is asking, Hitesh is asking, sir, do you also guide new entrepreneurs by any chance, specifically for a tech segment?
No, I don't have the capacity to guide on specific areas like this. I wish I could. But I do indulge in guiding people who want to become civil servants. I have a host of them who are a part of this. Any one of you willing to take a take a chance with the civil service, you're most welcome.
Sure. And sir, the last question which I'm interested to ask is that what is your message to the school community, school education community, and especially in these times of the COVID-19 when the schools are closed, people, they are teaching online, they are passing through a lot of stress, and also like there are issues about school fees, teachers' salary, like the whole the system has got affected. So how like what's your message in these difficult times?
My message to them is that these are difficult times, and difficult times and challenges brings out the best in the best person. So don't give up, don't give in, keep your motivation high. Look at those people who are still motivated despite these difficulties, and seek inspiration from those people. There are many people around. I seek inspiration from those people who are keeping the tempo high despite the fact that everything seems to be collapsing. There are a lot of positives in COVID as well. Let's try and leverage those positives, technology being one of them.
Sure. Sir, people are asking about the address of the portal. Sir, like if you can type.
I'll just type it out here.
Yes. That will help.
This is the address of the portal. This is the name of the book.
Name has not.
And this is where you can get it.
Yes. So it's all written here. The portal name is nexusofgood.org.in. The name of the book is Ethical Dilemma of a Civil Servant, and you can go on Amazon and order it. So I think, sir, it has been a great session, great learning as usual, and great inspiration, of course, to like listen to you one-to-one. It's amazing. Like every time I meet you, I get like charged up and feel inspired. So it's
thank you.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Sir, people are asking for your email ID, if you can take it.
He had given that earlier, but I'll give it again.
Yes. Please. And sir, I wish to again acknowledge that the type of reforms you have put in the health sector, coal sector, and the education sector, these are landmarks, steps which are still people are like benefiting from it, because I work in also in the health sector. I also work in the governance sector. I also work in the education sector. So I have had the benefit of like seeing you across the various sectors and the impact you have created and inspired so many other government officers and also the private sector people. So with this, I wish to.
Thank you very much. God bless you. Take care.
Thank you so much, sir.